Hey, so welcome back. What I wanted to discuss today is lack of forensic evidence by the perpetrator at the crime scene. I've seen a lot of people expressing disbelief that Brian Kohberger, the suspect in the Idaho 4 killings, would have left no forensic evidence at the scene other than his DNA that was found on the snap of the knife sheath. People have been saying that they just don't believe that's possible. That's why they think it was a setup, that somebody else was involved, that somebody cleaned up, that it had to be a group of people, etc. But it's actually not unusual for cases where one perpetrator is involved for them to leave little or no forensic evidence behind. And you don't have to be a mastermind to do that. In fact, I'm going to share with you the case of a 15-year-old in California who murdered an elderly couple and had police baffled because he left zero forensic evidence at the crime scene. Now, this is Claudia Maupin and her husband, Chip Northrup. They were found murdered on April 14th, 2013, in their home in Davis, California. When they had failed to appear for church services on that Sunday morning, family members went and found them in the home. And when they found them, they had discovered both had been stabbed over 60 times and that they had been mutilated. Now, I'm not going to go into the specifics of the mutilation because it is just horrific. So when authorities got there, they were completely baffled because for as extensive as a crime scene as it was, stabbed over 60 times, both victims, mutilation, etc., there was no evidence leading to a perpetrator. None. No DNA, no hairs, no clothing fibers, nothing. And it turned out that this killer that left behind no trace was a 15-year-old. A 15-year-old named Daniel Marsh. Now, I'm not going to show his picture. I don't like to show the pictures of perpetrators. I only like to show the pictures of the victims because I like people to realize that these are real cases with real people that were murdered. And so I don't like to give that recognition to perpetrators by showing their photos. Now, Marsh was actually first known in the community as being somewhat of a hero. He had made headlines back in 2008 when he was 10 because he used CPR to save his father's life when his father was having a heart attack, and he received an American Red Cross Heroes Award. Now, not too long after he had won that award, his parents went on to get divorced, and Marsh started having a change in his behavior, and he even had admitted he had wanted to kill the woman that his mother was having an affair with. And after that, he just had problems in school. He had been diagnosed with antisocial behavior, and he started hatching a plan to murder people. As young as 10 years old, he was already thinking these thoughts. So on the night that he murdered Maupin and Northup, he had decided he was putting his plan in place. He couldn't fight his urges anymore. And he was staying at his father's house, who happened to be 2 doors down from the elderly couple. And he went through the neighborhood looking for homes that were doors unlocked, windows open. And he found that the Maupins had a window open, just had a screen. So he cut open the screen and went into the house. Now, law enforcement has actually used this case as one of their teaching cases within the community because of the lack of forensics and how it puzzled them and how it took a couple months to catch up with him. And the only reason why Marsh got caught was because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He bragged to his friends, and that's what led to him being caught. From one of the articles, it said investigators were left stumped as well as horrified. There was absolutely zero forensic evidence implicating the murderer at the scene of the crime. Marsh had been meticulous in covering his tracks. From another article, the police were stumped at the start because the killer had left no evidence of any kind at the scene. There were no DNA, fingerprints, or footprints. Nothing seemed to be missing from the home either. The FBI was called in as well, and about 2 months into the investigation, they caught a big break. So it goes on to say, as authorities continued questioning neighbors and looking for potential suspects, they received a tip regarding the identity of the killer. But the information was scarcely believable. A 17-year-old high schooler called 911 and mentioned that he knew who killed the couple. He named his best friend, 15-year-old Daniel Marsh, as the person who committed the murders, and stated that Daniel had told him about what he had done on the night of April 13th, 2013. So when police first started interviewing him, he denied that he was involved, and then he finally did confess to the crimes, and he said he had meticulously planned. He wore black clothing, wore a black face mask, and taped the soles of his shoes so that he would not leave any footprint patterns. Now, at the same time, law enforcement had went and done a search warrant at his mother's home where they found the knife and his bloody clothing. So had he not confessed to a friend and then also kept the knife and the clothing, he probably would have gotten away with the crime. He very well likely would have. In fact, one of the investigators told him, "You almost got away with it." Now, what's even scarier is he also told investigators that he planned on killing again if he had not been caught. And he was going to switch weapons with each murder so that it would make it harder to catch him. He was already planning on using a baseball bat for his next set of murders. It's just unsettling to think that had he not confessed to a friend, to think of how many more people he could have killed before he was caught. And as I've mentioned earlier, they have used this case to illustrate the challenges that they faced, especially because of the lack of forensics. This case is used for their Citizens Academy. And in that article, it states that this was the type of investigation that police fear the most. A double homicide with no suspect whatsoever, said Lieutenant Glenn Glasgow from the Davis Police Department. He was the investigations commander at the time. He said we were basically starting from the ground floor. And they go on to talk about how during this class they provide insight into how they solved this case, and how they called neighboring law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and the California Department of Justice. They said the investigation pulled them in multiple directions. There was no evidence of a motive, such as burglary or robbery, so they set their sights on other possible suspects ranging from family members to people the couple may have encountered. Within 2 months, detectives had logged some 2,500 investigative hours, traveling as far north as Nevada to scope out possible leads, written and served 35 search warrants, and generated 218 police reports. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Multiple agencies, lots of man hours before they finally caught the perpetrator. Has a lot of parallels to the Idaho 4 case. And I just wanted to bring this Marsh case up tonight because it is illustrative of how oftentimes there is little to no forensics left behind by the perpetrator, especially when it's a single perpetrator. The chances of forensics being left behind go up the more perpetrators there are. And that's what is so, I guess I shouldn't say humorous because we're talking murder cases, but it is humorous, honestly, that so many of the people that think Kohberger couldn't have done this and that he's being set up because there's so little evidence left at the scene seem to think that 4 or 5 perpetrators wouldn't have left any evidence. So for some reason they think Kohberger would have left tons of evidence because it was just him, that he must have left hair, that he must have left more DNA, etc. But 4 or 5 perps would have had a meticulous crime scene. No, it's actually the opposite. A single perp is less likely to leave a lot of forensics at the scene. The more perps you have, the sloppier the scene gets. And then also after the crime, the sloppier they are at keeping it concealed, because loose lips sink ships, and you often have somebody that talks and will turn on the other person. Now, in this case of Daniel Marsh, he fortunately went and bragged to his friends and was caught before, fortunately, he could kill again, because he was planning on killing again. So if you have any questions, let me know. And as I've said before, if there's anything else you would like me to cover, just send me a message and I'll look into it.